A billionaire caught his maid studying at 2 a.m. What he did next shocked everyone. He ruled his world in silence. She lived in the shadows of his empire. But one night at 2:16 a.m., a sliver of light under the kitchen door revealed the truth they both tried to forget. Because sometimes the past doesn't stay buried. It waits for the right moment to return. And in that quiet hour, a billionaire would remember the girl he once left behind. And the maid would discover the man who once saved her, only to break her heart. The night that changed everything. The Whitaker estate stood like a monument to time itself. Perched on the windswept cliffs of Heon Hill, it was all stone and glass, imposing, flawless, untouched by the years that had quietly passed through its grand halls. Thomas Whitaker had designed it that way. Every line, every corner, every shadow was deliberate, as if he could build away the memories that refused to leave him. At 61, Thomas was more legend than man, the kind of billionaire whose name graced the front pages but whose face was rarely seen. Widowed for over a decade, childless by choice, he was the embodiment of success and isolation. Behind wrought iron gates and a wall of wealth, he lived alone, save for the silent staff who knew better than to disturb him. But on this night something stirred. It wasn't the wind battering the coastal windows or the soft hum of the security system that kept the world at bay. It was a light, a narrow golden sliver, creeping out from under the kitchen door at 2:16 IE. Thomas wasn't a man prone to curiosity. He valued routine, predictability. The staff were trained, disciplined, discreet. By 10 o'clock the house would fall into its usual stillness, as though it held its breath till dawn. No one, not even Olivia the chef or Alfred his loyal manager, would dare break that rhythm. But tonight, someone had. Barefoot, dressed in nothing but a cashmere robe, Thomas moved with the measured calm of a man who had faced boardrooms and buried lovers. Fear was a stranger to him now. He opened the door slowly, expecting perhaps a forgotten light, a careless oversight. He saw stopped him cold. There, at the marble kitchen island, sat Lena Morales. She wasn't cleaning, wasn't preparing breakfast ahead of schedule. No, she was studying. Her dark hair, usually pulled back tight, now tumbled freely down her back. A threadbare grey sweater wrapped around her small frame, sleeves pushed up to reveal ink-stained fingers, calloused and worn. Textbooks, battered and dog-eared, surrounded her. One lay open to a diagram of the human heart, hand-drawn with remarkable precision. Thomas didn't speak at first. He watched, frozen in a moment that felt oddly familiar, yet impossible. She mouthed the words silently, tracing the lines of veins and chambers with the tip of her pencil. Oblivious to his presence, until he cleared his throat. Lena jolted, eyes wide with panic. The ceramic mug before her trembled as she stood abruptly. I'm sorry, sir, she stammered. I didn't mean to. I thought everyone was asleep. Thomas raised a hand, stopping her. His voice, low and even, cut through the tension. You're fine. I was just coming for water. She reached for her books, already gathering them into a neat pile. I'll clean this up, right away. You don't have to. He stepped past her, filling a glass at the dispenser. Silence stretched between them, taut and strange. His eyes flicked to the open page. What are you studying? He asked. Lena hesitated, then lowered her gaze. Entrance exams. For a pre-med program. I study after hours. Can't afford to take classes during the day. Her voice softened. If I pass, I might get a scholarship. Something tightened in his chest. A familiar ache, unspoken. He glanced again at the books. Biology, chemistry, anatomy. They didn't belong here, in his kitchen, in the hands of his maid. You want to be a nurse? Doctor, she corrected quietly, meeting his eyes for the first time. And there it was. That look. It struck him like a memory he couldn't place. Something in her eyes, fierce and fragile all at once. He didn't reply. Couldn't. Instead, He set down his glass and walked away. But sleep wouldn't come. Up in his study, the moonlight casting silver across the hardwood floors, Thomas stood at the window and stared into the darkened garden. Her face lingered in his mind. Not just because she dared to dream, but because he knew that face. Long ago, when he was a younger man, with a heart still foolish enough to believe, there was a girl with dark eyes and a quiet voice, a girl he once left behind. And suddenly, the sliver of light beneath the kitchen door wasn't just a breach in routine. It was a breach in his past. Session 1. The memory he couldn't escape. The morning came cold and grey, with clouds pressing low against the sea, and the house felt heavier somehow, as if the walls themselves remembered something Thomas could not. He stood in front of the mirror, tying the same black silk tie he had worn for years. His reflection, sharp yet wary, stared back at him, but behind his eyes, another image lingered. Lena, in the kitchen. Her voice steady, her eyes defiant. A doctor. He shook his head, brushing it off, or trying to. He had a full day ahead, calls to London, meetings in Manhattan, a proposal to review. Yet none of it seemed urgent. Not anymore. By the time he reached the breakfast room, Alfred had already laid out the morning paper, his coffee steaming beside it. But Thomas didn't sit. His gaze moved toward the windows, past the hedges, to the cliffs beyond. "Alfred," he said quietly, "how long has Miss Morales worked here?" Alfred looked up, surprised. 3 years, sir, since the autumn after Mrs. Whitaker's passing." Thomas nodded slowly, running his thumb along the edge of the table. "Has she ever said anything about her background, her family?" Much. Her file says she's from Texas, sends most of her wages home, if I recall. She's never caused trouble, if that's what you mean." Trouble? No, she wasn't trouble. But she was something. A spark in the silence. Later that day, Thomas sat in the back of his car, the city rushing past in a blur of steel and glass. But his mind wasn't on the boardroom. It wasn't on the contracts or the rising stock prices. It was in the past. 35 years ago. Back when he was just Thomas Whitaker Jr., the reckless heir with something to prove. There had been a girl, hadn't there? He couldn't remember her name, only her face, half shadowed by the dusk of some small Texas town. He had been sent there to understand the people, as his father called it. A lesson in humility. He was 26. She was, what, 17? 18? He hadn't asked. They'd met at a gas station. Her hands smelled of oil and oranges. She had laughed at him for not knowing how to pump his own gas, and for a moment he had felt human. He remembered the way she talked about becoming a doctor, about leaving the dust behind. Someday, she had said, "I'll leave this place. I'll go somewhere no one knows me, and I'll matter there." He hadn't believed her. Not really. Dreams like that didn't survive. And in the end, he hadn't stayed. Business called him back. His father had summoned him with a single, cold line. "You're not paid to play peasant." He never saw her again. That evening, Thomas returned home earlier than usual. The house was quiet, save for the ticking of the long case clock in the foyer. He wandered aimlessly through rooms that once held meaning, now hollow, polished, perfect. When he passed the kitchen, he paused. No light tonight. But he could almost see her there, still bent over her books, lips moving in silence, chasing something bigger than herself. Could it be her? It's impossible. Yet the thought clawed at him. Upstairs, in his private study, he opened an old drawer. It had remained locked for years, untouched since Marjorie's death. Among the yellowed papers and faded photographs, he found a letter, folded, fragile, addressed to him but never opened. He recognized the handwriting. Not Marjorie's. Hers. A girl from Texas. His hands trembled as he unfolded it. The ink had bled slightly, but the words were still there. "Thomas, I don't know if you'll ever read this, but I wanted you to know I passed the test. I'm leaving next week. You probably don't remember what you said about dreams, about how some people get to live them and others don't. I believed you then. I don't anymore. Thank you for coming here, for seeing me, even if it was just for a little while. It was enough. L. His breath caught. Said he lied. Right. No, it couldn't be. Could it? The next morning, Thomas did something he hadn't done in years. He sought her out. He found her in the garden, kneeling by the rose bushes near the west wall. She didn't hear him approach, her fingers gently brushing soil from the petals, lost in thought. Miss Morales. She stood quickly, brushing dirt from her hands. Yes, sir. He didn't speak for a moment, just looked at her. Really looked. How long have you wanted to be a doctor? He asked finally. She blinked, surprised by the question. Since I was a kid. My father was sick a lot. We didn't have much, and I used to think, if I could learn, maybe I could help. Thomas nodded slowly, the pieces falling together like a puzzle he didn't know he was solving. Did you ever live in Texas? He asked. Lena's eyes narrowed, cautious. Yes, sir. Near Abilene. His heart pounded. Did you ever know someone named Thomas? Years ago. Her face changed, a flicker of something, recognition, disbelief, pain. If I tell you, will you remember? She didn't say it, but he heard it all the same. I think I might have, she said carefully, but he left. Thomas took a breath, the weight of memory crashing over him. If that night I hadn't walked away. He swallowed hard. Lena, was it me? She looked at him then, truly looked, and in her eyes he found the answer. And for the first time in his life, Thomas Whitaker, the man who built empires, who conquered markets, felt small. Because in the girl before him he saw not just what he had forgotten, but what he had lost. Session 2, The Weight of the Past. The wind picked up along the cliffs that afternoon, cold and insistent, as if the earth itself could sense the stirring of something long buried. In the garden, among the roses that had once been Marjorie's pride, Thomas stood face to face with a past he thought he'd left behind. Lena didn't move. She stood still, arms crossed loosely, her eyes watching him, not with anger, but with something more dangerous. Expectation. For a long time, neither of them spoke. You remembered me, she said finally, voice low, as if the air between them could shatter. Thomas ran a hand through his silvered hair, exhaling, not at first. I didn't think it could be you. Lena gave a small, bitter laugh. Why would you? I was just a girl at a gas station, remember? Her words hit like stones. He deserved them. Every one. I didn't come back, he admitted. I didn't even say goodbye. You didn't have to purse, she said, looking away. You were just passing through. I knew that. I was the fool for thinking it meant more. Thomas stepped closer, but not too close. It did. I just didn't realize it then. Lena looked up, and in her eyes he saw something he had never been able to face. Regret reflected back at him. Inside the house, the weight of silence followed them like a third presence. Thomas poured himself a glass of scotch. Though it was barely past noon, his hands weren't as steady as they used to be. Lena remained by the window, arms hugging herself. You built all this, she said softly, scanning the room, but it's empty. It was supposed to be, he replied. After Marjorie died, I didn't want people, just control. She turned, eyes narrowing. And now you want to control me? Thomas's head snapped up. No. God, no. Then why the scholarship? Why the money? Why now? He set the glass down, untouched. Because I saw you again, Lena. That night in the kitchen. I saw the same fire in you that I saw all those years ago, and I realized I had a chance to do something right. She shook her head. You don't owe me anything. Maybe not, but I owe myself the truth. The truth. It sat between them like a chasm. Thomas took a breath, one that felt too heavy for his chest. When I left Texas, I told myself it was for the best. That you'd forget me, that you'd find your own way. Lena's voice was sharp now, cutting through the polished air. You promised to help me. He flinched. I waited for your call. I waited for weeks. Then my father died and I had to give up school, take care of my family. I cleaned houses, I worked nights, I survived. And you vanished. Thomas stepped forward, his voice cracking. If I had known. You didn't want to know, she interrupted, tears brimming but unfallen. You went back to your world and I stayed in mine. The silence stretched again, but this time it was different. Not the silence of strangers, but of two people standing at the edge of an old wound. Thomas sat down heavily in the armchair by the fire. He looked older now, smaller. I've spent my whole life building things, Lena. Companies, fortunes, walls around my heart. But nothing I've built has ever lasted. Nothing has ever mattered. She didn't respond. Her arms dropped to her sides, fists clenched. She didn't know what to believe anymore. I don't expect forgiveness, Thomas said, his voice almost a whisper, but I do want to help you, if you'll let me. Night fell quickly, as it often did near the sea. Lena returned to her small quarters at the edge of the estate. The same walls that had once felt like protection now felt like a cage. She sat on her narrow bed, the textbook still open from the night before, but her mind wasn't on medicine. It was on him, Thomas Whitaker, the man who once lit a spark in her heart and then walked away. She thought about the scholarship, about the Grace Fund, about the anonymous help she now knew wasn't so anonymous after all. If I take it, am I still free? If I refuse, do I lose everything again? The questions gnawed at her. She reached into the drawer beside her bed and pulled out an old photo of her father, holding her as a little girl, both of them smiling beneath the Texas sun. He had believed in her, even when the world didn't. And now the man who once crushed her belief wanted to restore it. The next morning, Lena stood at Thomas's study door. She didn't knock this time. He looked up, surprised, but said nothing. I'll accept the scholarship, she said, her voice steady, but on one condition. Thomas stood slowly. Anything. You stop feeling guilty. He froze. You can't fix the past, she continued. Neither can I. But we both have a chance to do something now, and I won't carry your guilt on top of everything else. His eyes softened, and for the first time in decades, something broke inside him. Not pain, not regret. Relief. Agreed. They didn't speak much after that. They didn't need to. But something had shifted. The air in the house was different now, charged with the presence of possibility. That night, as Lena returned to her books, something caught her eye on the kitchen counter. A letter, addressed simply. L. She opened it, her hands trembling. I don't know what our story is anymore, but I do know this. You're stronger than I ever was, stronger than I could have imagined. You don't need me to carry you, but if you ever fall, I'll be there. Not because I owe you, but because I believe in you. T. Lena sat down, the letter pressed to her heart. For the first time in years, she didn't feel alone. Session 3. The promise she made to herself. The city felt colder than she remembered. Lena stepped off the train, her bag slung over one shoulder, textbooks pressing against her back like anchors. The air in Queens had that thick, metallic bite, part sea, part asphalt, that seemed to cling to everything. It wasn't welcoming, but it was real, and that was enough. This wasn't the dream she once painted in her mind as a child, the elegant halls of some grand university, sunlight spilling over polished floors, professors who knew her name. No. This was a small campus, tucked between crumbling apartment blocks and a cracked sidewalk, a place for those who didn't belong anywhere else. But Lena didn't care. She wasn't here for beauty. She was here for truth. And she carried one in her chest, like armor. I won't waste this. Her dorm room was barely bigger than the linen closet she used to clean. One bed, one desk, one window with a view of a graffiti-covered wall. She stood in the center of it, breathing in the dust, the possibility. This is mine. All of it. The struggle, the chance, the choice. No one gave me this. I took it. She pulled out the letter from Thomas, folded now from too much reading, and placed it in the drawer beside her bed. She didn't need to look at it again. Not tonight. Tonight, she had her own promise to make. Lena sat at the desk, lit by a flickering lamp she found abandoned in the hall. She opened her notebook, blank and waiting, and wrote, I don't care how hard this gets. I won't give up. I won't let fear win. Not this time. She paused, letting the ink dry. Then added, I'm not that girl anymore, the one waiting for someone to come back. I'm the woman who keeps moving forward. Classes started before the city woke. The first lecture hall was cramped, the air stale with old books and young ambition. Lena sat in the back, unnoticed, her hands cold but steady. The professor didn't introduce himself. He just wrote Biokesh in bold, angry strokes across the board. Look around, he said, his voice sharp. Half of you won't be here by midterms. Lena didn't flinch. She wasn't here to be counted out. She was here to count herself in. Days became weeks, and Lena lost herself in the rhythm of survival. Classes from dawn till dusk, work-study in the evenings, wiping tables in the student cafe. Nights filled with flashcards, her eyes blurring over chemical equations and anatomical diagrams. There were no luxuries now. No sleep-ins, no warm meals, no quiet. Just the relentless beat of progress. But every time she thought of quitting, of slipping back into the shadows. She remembered that night in the kitchen, that light under the door, that look in Thomas's eyes when he finally saw her. One night, long after the campus had gone dark, Lena sat alone in the library. Her fingers ached from note-taking, her head heavy with exhaustion. She leaned back, rubbing her temples, and caught her reflection in the window. For a moment she didn't recognize herself. Gone was the girl in the uniform, the maid who moved like a ghost through polished halls. This woman was tired, yes, but she was present. And in that moment she whispered to herself, keep going. But life, as it always did, found a way to test her resolve. 3 weeks into the semester, Lena received a call. Her sister Mary had another seizure. The money she had sent home wasn't enough. Hospital bills were piling up. Lena's stomach dropped as she listened to her mother cry softly on the other end of the line. I'm trying, Mama, she said, gripping the phone so tightly her knuckles whitened. I swear I'm trying. That night she sat on her dorm bed, staring at her bank account. $128.47. It wasn't due. He felt, not for Murray, not for tuition, not for both. She picked up her phone, her thumb hovering over Thomas's number. But she couldn't do it. I promised myself. I won't be saved again. Not like that. She stood abruptly, grabbing her coat. She needed air. Outside, the city pulsed with indifference. Lena walked aimlessly, her thoughts a storm. She ended up at the small church at the corner of her block, the doors still open, a soft light glowing inside. She slipped into the last pew, the silence wrapping around her like a balm. Her hands trembled in her lap. Please, she whispered, just help me find a way. She didn't expect an answer, but as she sat there, something shifted. Not the world outside, but within her. The next morning, Lena marched into the campus admin office. She signed up for extra work, study hours, took a tutoring position in the evenings, and posted flyers offering private lessons in biology and chemistry. She wouldn't ask Thomas for more. She wouldn't break her promise. She would earn this. 2 weeks later, a quiet knock interrupted her late-night study session. A small boy stood at her door, clutching one of her flyers. "His sister needs help with science," he mumbled, eyes wide. "Can you teach her?" Lena smiled, kneeling to meet his gaze. "I can teach her everything she wants to know." As autumn deepened, so did Lena's resolve. She lived on coffee and determination. Her shoes wore thin. Her fingers stayed ink-stained and sore. But slowly, things shifted. Her tutoring picked up. Mari's hospital released her home. She stopped surviving. She started living. One evening, after a particularly grueling exam, Lena returned to her room to find an envelope on her bed. An return address. Inside, a single note. "For the days you forget how far you've come. But you're not alone." There was no money, no offers, just words. But they were enough. Because Lena had made a promise to herself. And this time, she wouldn't break it. Session 4. The day the rain didn't stop. The sky had already darkened by midday. Rain clung to the windows like a warning, tapping relentlessly, streaking the glass in blurred lines that matched Lena's mood. She sat at her desk, unmoving, the pages of her anatomy textbook untouched. Outside, the city felt heavy. Inside, Lena felt it too. It had started as a drizzle that morning, a quiet kind of sorrow, but by the time afternoon lectures ended, it was a downpour, cold and unyielding, as if the sky itself had run out of patience. She hadn't been able to focus all day. Not since the call. The text had read just 3 words from her younger brother, Jules. Lena had called home immediately, heart pounding in her throat. Her mother had collapsed at the diner she worked at. Too many hours, too little rest, too much worry. The doctor at the small clinic said it was exhaustion, but Lena could hear it in her brother's voice. Fear. "Mari's okay," he said, his voice trembling. "But Mama, she won't stop coughing. They said she needs tests, more than we can pay for." Lena had nodded, as if he could see her. "I'll figure it out," she said, though she had no idea how. Now, as the rain pounded harder, she sat still, fingers wrapped around the edge of her desk like it was the only thing holding her upright. Her bank account blinked in front of her on the screen. $89.72. She closed the laptop. Hard. This isn't happening. Not again. Not when I've come this far. By nightfall, the rain was merciless. The streets flooded, the subways stalled, and the cold crept into the bones of the city. Lena wrapped herself in the thinnest of jackets, staring out at the storm. Her roommates had gone home for the weekend. The dorm was silent, except for the relentless sound of water beating against the roof. She wanted to scream. Instead, she picked up the phone. Her thumb hovered over Thomas's name again. She had sworn she wouldn't. "I made a promise. No saving, no more. Hueven." She pressed call, holding her breath. It rang once, twice. Then, "Lena." His voice was softer than she expected, rough with sleep or something deeper. She froze. Her throat closed. "I shouldn't have caught. Tell me." The silence between them stretched, only the rain filling the space. "My mum," she whispered. "She collapsed. The clinic. They can't do the tests she needs. I don't have enough. I didn't know who else." "Akame." "But what? No." "Text me the address. I'll handle it." and before she could argue, the line went dead. The storm hadn't let up by morning, but Lena didn't sleep. She paced the tiny room, guilt gnawing at her chest. Why did I call him? What did I just open? A knock at her door broke the stillness. She opened it to find a courier, soaked to the bone, holding a small envelope. "For you," he said, then disappeared into the rain. Inside the envelope was a train ticket to Texas. Departure tonight. A note. "You shouldn't have to face this alone. Go." Lena stared at the ticket, heart racing. Beckworth. The place she ran from. The place that made her. The place that broke her. She hadn't been back in nearly 4 years. And now the storm outside seemed nothing compared to the one rising inside her. The train ride south felt endless. Grey skies blurred past the windows, matching the ache behind her eyes. She hadn't told anyone she was coming. Not Jules, not Mari, not even her mother. What would she say? She clutched her old backpack tightly, the one she had brought with her when she first left, filled now with books, hope, and a fear she couldn't shake. Would they see her as she was now? Or as the girl who had left them behind? The town hadn't changed. Still the same cracked roads, the same rusted signs, still the same diner on the corner where her mother had worked every day since she was 16. But Lena had changed. She stepped off the platform, her feet unsure on the familiar ground. The rain had followed her. She reached the small apartment they shared, heart pounding in her ears. Jules answered the door, wide-eyed, shocked. "Lena." She didn't wait. She pulled him into a tight embrace, holding him like the child he still was, even as he tried to be the man of the house. Inside, Mari sat on the couch, wrapped in blankets, her face lighting up when she saw her. "Lena, you're really here." Their mother was asleep in the bedroom, pale and thin, her breathing shallow but steady. Lena sat beside her, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. "I'm here now, Mama," she whispered. By nightfall, the doorbell rang. She knew it would be him. Thomas stood there, raincoat dripping, but eyes sharp. No chauffeur, no suit, just him. He stepped inside, looking around the modest space. "Where is she?" Lena led him to the bedroom, words failing. Thomas stood by the door, silent, then nodded once. "I've arranged everything. The tests, the hospital. We'll get her there first thing in the morning." Lena looked at him, something unspoken passing between them. "Are you really here?" she asked. He met her gaze. "Because I should have come a long time ago." Later that night, as the rain slowed, they sat on the old porch, the creak of the wood beneath them familiar. Lena wrapped her arms around herself, staring at the sky. "You can't fix this for me." "I know. I'm not that girl anymore." "I know." She turned to him, eyes fierce. "Then why keep coming back?" Thomas took a deep breath. "Because you changed me, Lena. I didn't know it then, but you did. And maybe I can't fix the past, but I can stand beside you now." She didn't answer. But she didn't ask him to leave. And for now, that was enough. Session 5. The choice that could break them. The dawn came muted, veiled behind grey clouds still swollen from the storm. The air in the small apartment was thick with the scent of rain-dampened wood and brewing coffee, but underneath it lingered something heavier. Uncertainty. Lena stood by the kitchen sink, staring out the window at the puddles glistening on the street below. Her fingers gripped the edge of the counter, knuckles white. Behind her, Thomas sat at the table, his coat draped over the chair, a stack of medical forms spread out before him. He'd barely slept. Neither of them had. They were supposed to leave in an hour. The hospital in Dallas was ready. The tests had been arranged, the best doctors contacted, everything was in motion. Everything except Lena. "I'm not sure I can go back," she said suddenly, her voice breaking the heavy quiet. Thomas looked up. What do you mean? She turned, arms crossed tightly. I can't just leave them, not again. Thomas rose slowly, careful. You're not leaving them. You're helping. By running away. Her voice was sharper now, tinged with the exhaustion of years she hadn't spoken about. By going back to a life they don't understand? They need me, Thomas. Here. Now. He needs you healthy, whole. Not burnt out, not broken. Her eyes flashed. You don't get it. You've never had to choose. His jaw clenched, but he didn't speak. But she was right. He had never had to choose between love and duty, between dreams and survival. His wealth had shielded him from those impossible crossroads. Until now. Lena, he began, stepping closer. I've spent my life watching people from a distance, investing in them, managing them, but I never cared what they did with it after. You're different. She shook her head. Don't make this about us. It is about us. A beat. His voice softened. You said you're not that girl anymore. I know, but I'm not the man I was either. I won't walk away this time. She looked at him, eyes wet but unyielding. And if I stay? He swallowed hard. You won't be staying for them. You'll be staying because you're afraid. That hit her like a slap. She turned away, blinking back the tears, the truth she didn't want to hear. Because deep down, she was afraid. Afraid of losing them. Afraid of losing herself. Afraid that everything she'd fought for was too fragile to last. Can't choose, she whispered. You already have. The car ride to the hospital was silent. Mari sat beside her, head resting on her shoulder, fragile but breathing easier now. Jules followed in the back, Thomas at the wheel. Lena stared straight ahead, her mind a storm. At the hospital, nurses moved quickly, gently ushering their mother into care. Lena stood frozen at the edge of the sterile hallway, watching as the world moved without her. Thomas came to stand beside her. She'll be okay, he said quietly. Lena nodded, but didn't move. Later, when the doctors confirmed it was nothing life-threatening, just severe exhaustion, easily managed if treated, Lena felt her knees buckle. She sank into the waiting room chair, her breath shaky. Thomas sat across from her, hands clasped. You saved her, he said. She looked up, hollow. No. You did. He corrected gently. We did. But it wasn't over. Back at the apartment that night, Lena sat alone in her old room, the walls still covered in posters from a life she'd tried to leave behind. The door creaked open softly. Jules stood there, uncertain. Are you going back? She didn't answer. He stepped in, sitting beside her. You know Mama's always been proud of you, even when she didn't say it. Lena smiled sadly. I left you all. He shook his head. You gave us hope. Don't lose yours now. The next morning, Lena stood at the crossroads, both literal and in her heart. Her train back to New York left in 2 hours. Thomas waited by the car, watching her as she hugged Murray, kissed her mother's forehead, promised Jules she'd call every night. As she approached him, he spoke first. You don't have to explain. She nodded, grateful. Then he reached into his coat, pulling out a folded piece of paper. But what's this? An offer, he said simply. Lena unfolded it, her tuition covered in full. No conditions. No signatures. Just his name at the bottom. Her eyes widened. I told you. He cut her off. You promised not to be saved. I'm not saving you. I'm investing. And in that moment, standing between past and future, between rain-soaked streets and unknown horizons, Lena made her choice. "I'll go back," she said softly. "But not because I'm running, because I'm ready." Thomas smiled, relief washing over him. "Then let's go." She stopped him, placing a hand on his arm. "This time," she said, eyes locking on his. "We do it together. No more distance, no more silence." His breath caught, and slowly he nodded. As the train pulled away, Lena looked out at the fading skyline, the storm now behind her. She had chosen herself. She had chosen her family. She had chosen him. Session 6, when silence hurts more than words. The city welcomed her back with cold indifference. The same crowded streets, the same flickering lights, the same breathless rush that never seemed to stop. But Lena, she was no longer the same. Her footsteps were firmer now, each one echoing the promise she had made on that train. "This is my life, my choice, and I won't walk it in silence anymore." Thomas had stayed behind in Texas for a few days, making sure her family was settled. He told her he'd meet her in New York by week's end. His voice had been warm, steady, and full of something she hadn't dared hope for. Commitment. But as the days passed, something else settled into Lena's chest. A quiet unease. The first sign came on a Tuesday. She was in the library, drowning in patient case studies, when her phone buzzed. It was Professor Ellis, her clinical advisor. "Can we talk?" They met in his office that afternoon, sunlight streaming through dust-covered blinds. He sat behind his desk, glasses perched low, eyes unreadable. "I received a call," he began, folding his hands, "from the Grace Fund." Lena's heart stilled. "Patient," replied the other. "They're requesting a review of your academic standing. They said—" He paused, hesitant. "They said your performance might not meet the standards required to continue the scholarship." She blinked. "That's not possible. I've passed every exam." "I know." His voice was gentle, but the request came from the fund's trustee, a Thomas Whitaker. Her breath caught. "No, it couldn't be." "Are you sure?" she whispered. Professor Ellis nodded. "I didn't want to believe it either, but I thought you should know." That night the city was loud, alive with honking horns and neon lights, but all Lena heard was the echo of that name. Tempters. The man who said he believed in her. The man who had promised no more conditions, no more games. Why would he doubt her now? She paced her tiny room, the walls closing in. Was this what trust felt like? Fragile? Conditional? Her phone buzzed again. Hours. She let it ring. 2 days passed. No messages. No explanations. Only silence. The kind that felt louder than any lie. On the 3rd day, she couldn't bear it any longer. She went to him. His penthouse overlooked the city like it was his kingdom. Cold glass, sharp lines, everything in place. She knocked once. He opened the door almost immediately, surprise flashing in his eyes. Relief followed. She stepped inside, trembling. "Why?" He frowned. "Why what?" "Why did you call the fund? Why did you ask them to review me?" His face paled. "I didn't. It lied to me. I'm not—" His voice rose, wounded. "I would never do that." He said it was you. Thomas ran a hand through his hair, stepping back, shaking his head. "I haven't spoken to them since I left the board. I handed over control weeks ago." "To who?" He hesitated. Her heart sank. "To who?" "To Marjorie's brother." The name hit like ice. Philip Ross. The man who had always hated her. The man who saw Lena as a stain on Tomas's life. A threat to everything the Whitaker name stood for. "You let him decide my future," she whispered, voice cracking. "I didn't think." "No, you didn't." The silence between them stretched, thick and suffocating. Lena turned away, tears blurring her vision. "You said no more distance, no more silence." "I didn't know. You didn't care enough to know." She moved to the door. "Lena, please." But she was already gone. Outside, the cold bit through her coat, but she didn't feel it. All she felt was the weight of betrayal. Not just from him, but from herself, for believing. 3 days passed. She buried herself in work, clinical rounds, tutoring, night shifts. Her phone stayed silent, but her heart wouldn't rest. Every time she passed the west wall of the campus garden, where roses still clung stubbornly to life, she thought of him, of his hands brushing hers, of his voice in the dark, of the way silence could be more painful than any truth. On the 4th night, there was a knock at her door. Not Thomas, Alfred. "I'm sorry to disturb you, Miss Morales," he said gently, his eyes kind. "But Mr. Whitaker, he's not well." Obviously, Lena's heart stopped. "What do you mean?" "He hasn't left the apartment since that night. He's cancelled meetings, missed calls. I'm worried." She stood frozen. "I thought you should know." The next morning, she stood outside his penthouse once more, her hand poised to knock. But this time, the door opened before she could. Thomas stood there, gaunt, eyes hollow. Neither spoke. "I was afraid," he said finally, voice barely above a whisper. "Afraid that if I held on too tight, I'd lose you, and if I let go, I'd lose you anyway." Her chest ached. "Thomas, I didn't need you to save me. I needed you to believe in me. I do." "Then trust me." He nodded, stepping aside. They sat by the window, the city stretching endlessly below. "I've reclaimed the fund," he said. "Philip's out." She nodded. "More than that," he continued, reaching into his jacket, pulling out a letter. "This came for you." She took it, hands trembling. It was from the university board. "You've been selected for a special fellowship. A chance to lead a community health initiative, to create change, to be the change." Lena looked up, tears in her eyes. "I don't know if I can do this." Thomas took her hand firm and warm. "You already have." Section 7. The scar they couldn't see. The morning after the fellowship letter arrived, the city felt different. Not lighter, not brighter, but quieter, as if something in the noise had paused, waiting for her next move. Lena sat by the window, the letter still in her lap. The offer was real. Funding, leadership, a chance to build something that mattered. It was everything she had worked for, everything she had once thought was out of reach. And yet, her hands wouldn't stop shaking. Thomas stood across the room, pouring coffee into 2 mugs, the simple rhythm grounding them both. He hadn't spoken much since she arrived last night, only the necessary words, only the truths he could offer. Trust was fragile now, but it was still there, like a light flickering in the dark. He handed her the mug. "You didn't sleep." She gave a small, tired smile. "Neither did you." There was something between them now, something unspoken. The bond that had formed over shared silences, over mistakes, over years lost. And something else. A question. His eyes began again, soft and steady. Thomas reached for a folder on his desk. "There's something I haven't told you," he said, his voice low. Lena looked up, her heart bracing. He sat down beside her, placing the folder between them. "This isn't about me," he said. "It's about her, about Marjorie." The name landed like a stone. Marjorie Whitaker, the woman whose shadow still lived in the halls of his estate, in the corners of every room, in the weight he carried every day. Lena had never asked about her. She never wanted to. Some things were better left untouched. or so she thought. Thomas opened the folder slowly. Inside was an old, weathered letter. Yellowed at the edges, the ink slightly faded but still legible. He slid it toward her. "I found this after she died. I didn't understand it then, but I think you should read it." Lena hesitated, then picked it up. The handwriting was delicate, almost too perfect. Suddenly, "If you're reading this, then I'm gone and you've probably buried yourself in silence again. I hope I'm wrong, but I know you. There's something I never told you, something I never told anyone. Years ago, before you and I ever met, I worked at a clinic in Texas, volunteering, just for a summer. There was a family there, a young girl, her father sick, her mother barely holding on. The girl wanted to be a doctor. She was bright, fierce. She reminded me of what I used to be before all this. Her name was Lena Morales. I tried to help her. I gave her books, stayed late with her, helped her study. But I left. I came back to you, and I always wondered what happened to her. If you ever find her, if you ever see her again, help her, not out of guilt, out of love. Because the world needs more people like her. And maybe, just maybe, so do you." Lena's breath caught. The words blurred as tears welled in her eyes. She looked up, shaking her head. "Now this can't be." Thomas reached for her hand, his own trembling. "She knew you," he said, "before I did." Lena stood abruptly, the letter falling from her fingers. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" "I didn't know it mattered." "It matters." The room spun. The woman she had resented, the ghost she couldn't escape, she had seen her, long before Thomas ever did. Lena moved to the window, pressing her palm to the cold glass. The rain smeared the city into something unrecognizable. "I used to think," she whispered, "that no one ever saw me. Not really." Thomas rose, stepping closer. He did. Lena turned, eyes blazing with something between sorrow and rage. "And you? When you saw me in that kitchen, was it me or was it her?" His face crumpled. "It was you, always you." But the scar was open now. The one she didn't even know she carried. All those years, all that struggle. And yet, someone had known, had cared, and still left. "I need to go," Lena said, her voice distant. Thomas didn't stop her. She walked for hours, the city a blur beneath her feet. A fellowship letter still tucked in her bag. The letter from Marjorie burning in her chest. She ended up at the small park near the hospital where she'd once volunteered. The same park where she had first dared to dream. She sat on the bench, rain soaking through her coat, but she didn't care. All she could think of was that girl in Texas, the one who believed in kindness, in promises. The one she had to become again. Later that night, back in her dorm, Lena sat at her desk, the two letters side by side. One from the past, one from the future. She picked up her pen, her hand steady now, and began to write. "Thomas, I don't know what happens next, but I do know this. I am not a memory. I am not a second chance. I am not her. I am me. And I will build something that lasts, not because of the past, but in spite of it. If you can see that, if you can stand with me, not as a savior, not as a ghost, but as a partner, then maybe, just maybe, we still have something worth fighting for." Session 8. When the truth finally speaks. The city never stopped moving, but for Lena, everything had slowed. She stood outside Thomas's penthouse, the letter still in her hand, the night cold but clear. The rain had finally broken. The sky was sharp, stretched wide above the towers of steel and glass, and for the first time in days, she could breathe. Not because the ache was gone, but because she was ready to face it. She knocked once. The door opened almost instantly. Thomas stood there, pale, exhausted, but something flickered behind his eyes. a hope he dared not name. "Come in," he said, stepping aside. She didn't move. No, not yet. He froze. Lena looked up at him, steady. "I need you to hear me, really hear me." He nodded, silent. She handed him the letter. His hands trembled as he opened it, reading slowly, line by line, word by word. When he finished, he looked at her, eyes shining. "I see you." And there it was. No excuses. No defenses. Just truth. Lena stepped inside, closing the door behind her. They sat in the living room, the city lights casting long shadows on the floor. Neither spoke for a while. Finally, Thomas broke the silence. "I've lived most of my life in the past, Lena, trying to fix what I lost, trying to shape what couldn't be shaped. But you—" He paused, searching for the right words. "You're not my second chance. You're the chance I never deserved." Her throat tightened. "I don't want to carry your guilt, Thomas. I know. I want to carry you, only if you let me." She looked at him. Really look. The man who once walked away. The man who tried to right it all with money, with silence. But not now. Now he sat before her with nothing but himself, bare, flawed. "I'm not whole," she said, voice soft. "I don't know if I ever will be." "Neither am I." Lena reached out, fingers brushing his. "Then maybe we can figure it out together." The truth had spoken. Not in anger, not in blame, but in love. Weeks passed, and Lena threw herself into the fellowship. Her days were long, her nights longer, but there was light now, steady and unwavering. She worked with communities forgotten by the system, building not just clinics but trust. And Thomas, he didn't stand behind her. He stood beside her. No longer trying to fix, no longer trying to control, just there. One evening, as the sun set over the city, they stood together on the rooftop of the new clinic, still under construction. The skyline stretched before them, golden and endless. "You made this happen," Thomas said quietly. Lena shook her head. "We did." He smiled, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "I love you, Lena." She leaned into him, eyes closed. The past wasn't done with them yet. A package arrived the next morning, and a return address. Inside, a single photograph. Lena, years ago, at the clinic in Texas, with Marjorie. And on the back, in Marjorie's handwriting, "She will change the world. Help." Lena sat down, breath catching. Said. Thomas stood behind her, reading over her shoulder. "She never forgot you," he whispered. Lena turned, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Neither will I." Session 9. The letter she never expected. The photograph didn't leave her hands for days. Lena kept it close by her bed in her bag, sometimes pressed gently between the pages of her notebook. She couldn't stop looking at it, at the girl she used to be, standing beside Marjorie, unaware of how deeply that moment would echo through her life. But it wasn't just the image that haunted her. It was the message scrawled on the back in Marjorie's elegant, looping handwriting. "She will change the world. Help her." Lena read it again and again, wondering why. Why now? Why her? Why did the woman who had everything believe in a girl who had nothing? One cold morning, as snow began to fall over the city, a second envelope arrived. This time it was addressed to Lena, in the same handwriting. Her heart stopped. Thomas was away at a meeting, and for once she was glad. She needed to open this alone. With trembling hands she broke the seal, unfolding the yellowed pages inside. A familiar scent rose, a mix of lavender and something older, something like time itself. She sat down, her breath shallow, and began to read. Marjorie's letter, dated 3 weeks before her death. Dear Lena, I don't know if you'll ever read this, or if you'll even remember me, but I remember you. You, from the first day you walked into that little clinic in Texas, with your head high and your eyes full of fight. I knew then what I had lost in myself, and what you still had. I wanted to save you. I wanted to pull you out of that place and hand you the life I never had the courage to chase, but I didn't. I walked away. I married Thomas. I built a world of glass and stone, and I told myself that was enough. But you never left me. I watched you grow in my memory, year after year, wondering if you still believed, if you still fought. When I found out I was sick, I thought about you more than anyone else. I wondered if you had made it, if someone had come along who saw you the way I did. And then I realized something. It wasn't about someone else helping you. It was about me letting go of the fear that I couldn't. So I wrote this letter, and I asked if he ever found you, if fate was ever kind enough to bring you back into his life, to give it to you. Because there's something else I need to tell you. You didn't just remind me of myself. You reminded me of the child I lost. Before Thomas. Before the life I chose. I had a daughter once. She was born too early, too fragile. I never even got to name her. But when I looked at you, I saw her. The life she might have had. The strength she might have carried. The love she might have given. You are not her, Lena. But you are hope, and that is more than I ever dreamed to hold again. Please forgive me for the silence. And please know, you were loved. Always. Marjorie Whitaker. Lena couldn't breathe. Her chest ached, her vision blurred, her hands trembling as she clutched the letter. This was more than she had ever expected. More than she could hold. She wasn't Marjorie's daughter, but in some way she was a piece of her. A bridge between what was lost and what could still be found. She didn't know how long she sat there, the snow falling outside, the city fading away. Thomas found her hours later. He walked in, shaking off the cold, calling her name. And then he saw her, curled on the couch, the letter open beside her. His voice broken. "What is it?" She looked up, eyes red but calm. "She wrote to me." He froze. "Marjorie?" She nodded, handing him the letter. He read it slowly, carefully, his hand steady but his heart breaking open with each word. When he finished, he sat down beside her, silent. "I didn't know," he whispered. "She never told me." "I don't think she could." They sat there, the weight of Marjorie's truth between them, not as a wall, but as a thread. Binding, fragile, real. Lena leaned into him, her voice barely a breath. "She loved you. I loved her too. She loved me in her own way." Thomas nodded, pulling her close. "And now, we carry that love forward." The next morning, as the first light of dawn crept over the city, Lena stood by the window, watching the world wake. In her hand, the fellowship letter. On her heart, the memory of a woman she never truly knew, but would never forget. She turned to Thomas, who stood in the doorway, watching her with quiet strength. "I'm ready," she said. "For what?" "To build something new." Session 10. The Forever They Chose. The sun rose gently over the city, spilling soft gold across the rooftops, as if even the sky itself was ready for something new. Lena stood at the entrance of the clinic, her breath visible in the crisp morning air. The sign above her head read, "Humana Community Health," the name chosen in quiet honor of all the unseen lives they were about to serve. Behind her, the building still smelled of fresh paint and possibility. 5 small rooms, 1 waiting bench, shelves lined with donated supplies, modest, humble. But hers, and his. Thomas approached, his footsteps steady, carrying 2 mugs of coffee. "You didn't sleep again," he said, handing her one. Lena smiled, taking the cup, their fingers brushing. "I didn't want to miss this." They stood in silence for a moment, watching as the first patients began to arrive. An elderly couple holding hands, a young mother with a baby wrapped tight in a blanket, a boy no older than Jules once was, his coat too thin for winter. These were the people she had dreamed of helping. These were the lives she had fought for. Inside, the waiting room filled slowly, a gentle hum of voices, nervous but hopeful. Lena moved through them with ease now, her own ease not borrowed from anyone else. She greeted each face, each story, with a calm that came from having once been on the other side. Thomas stood at the back, watching. She didn't need him in front anymore. She didn't need anyone to speak for her. But she wanted him there, and that made all the difference. Later, after the rush of the morning slowed, Lena returned to the front desk, where a small envelope waited for her. No name, no return address. Just a single word. Forever. She opened it carefully. Inside was a photo. Her, Thomas. All three in different times, different places. Yet somehow connected. And behind it, a note. Forever isn't something we find, Lena. It's something we choose. And I choose you. Tears filled her eyes, but they didn't fall. Not this time. This time she stood tall. That evening, the clinic emptied, the sky outside painted in hues of orange and pink. Lena locked the front door, her heart full. Thomas waited by the bench outside, the same bench where it had all begun. She sat beside him, resting her head on his shoulder. For a long time they said nothing. They didn't need to, because this was it. Not a fairy tale, not a second chance, but a choice. To stay, to fight, to build, to love. Thomas turned to her, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. You once asked me why I kept coming back. She nodded. I didn't know then, but I do now. Because home wasn't a place, it was you. The wind picked up, but neither of them moved. Together they had walked through silence, through regret, through love that didn't come easy but came true. And now, together, they would walk into whatever came next. Forever wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. Epilogue. A year later, the clinic had doubled in size. Lena stood in the center of it, surrounded by patients, by staff, by lives that now knew her name. Thomas stood beside her, no longer a shadow of his past, but the man who had finally let go. A new plaque hung on the wall, just above the reception desk. In memory of Marjorie Whitaker, and for all the unseen. Here you are seen. Here you are loved. Forever. Conclusion. When the past no longer hurts. In the end, it wasn't the wealth. It wasn't the titles or the scholarships or even the clinic. It was the choice. A choice to forgive and to believe. To love when loving seemed too hard. To stay when running had always been easier. Lena Morales never wanted to be saved. She wanted to be seen. And Thomas Whitaker, the man who once built walls of stone and silence, had finally learned that true strength was not in holding back, but in letting go. Letting go of guilt, of fear, of the idea that he had to be perfect to be loved. Together, they built something far greater than any empire. They built trust. And trust, once earned, became their foundation. Through storms, through doubt, through old wounds that still ached in the quietest nights, they stood side by side, not as a billionaire and a maid, not as the past and the present, but as two souls who had fought to find forever. Because forever is not something you stumble into. It is something you choose, every day, in the smallest gestures, in the hardest conversations, in the willingness to stand in the light, even when shadows call. Lena's story was not one of rescue. It was one of becoming. She became the doctor she once dreamed of, not because someone gave her permission, but because she found her voice and used it. She became the woman who walked into rooms like she belonged, because she finally knew she did. She carried her family, not as a burden but as a root from which her strength grew. She carried Marjorie's love, not as a shadow, but as a light. And Thomas? He became more than a name, more than a legacy written in marble. He became human. Not through power, but through presence. Not by controlling the world, but by learning how to be part of it again. He learned that love was not about erasing the past, but about making peace with it, about choosing to see the beauty in what still remained. The lesson they leave behind. Love is not about fixing each other. It's about walking beside someone, flaws and all, and still choosing them. Forgiveness is not forgetting. It's remembering with grace. Family is not just blood. It's the people who stay, who believe, who fight for you even when you forget how to fight for yourself. Dreams are not lost to time. They wait for us, patiently, until we are brave enough to claim them. To every woman who has ever felt unseen. You are not invisible. Your story matters. Your dreams matter. And the right love, the kind that stays, the kind that believes, will see you exactly as you are and never ask you to be anything less. So when the past no longer hurts, what remains? Hope, healing, and a heart that still chooses love over and over again.
Thank you for watching this Millionaire Love Stories today. Every love story is a journey, filled with passion, heartbreak, and unforgettable moments. And here at Millionaire Love Stories, we bring you the most captivating tales of love, wealth, and destiny. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget, like to support more incredible content. Comment your thoughts. Would you choose love over riches? Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss our next story. Millionaire Love Stories, because love knows no limits. Because love changes everything. See you in the next story.